I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Wayne Staub, and I'm the proud member of the NJBIA team. I'm the Chief Business Relations Officer in charge of membership partnerships and affinity programs. If possible, if you want to move up and go back to your table later, that's fine. But you know, I know it's kind of like church and no one likes sitting right up front, but if you'd like to move up front and be a little bit more active or easier to dialogue, that would be great. And of course, we thanked our partners, but I have to thank our NJBIA team. We would not have been able to do this without so many. I can't name everybody because everybody really pitched into this. It was a great team effort. I want to remind the attendees that the complete bios for Angelo and the panelists can be found on page 28 of NJBIA magazine, which was in your bag. There will be time set aside for questions at the end of the panel discussion, but you are welcome to raise your hand at any point and wait for our moderator to call on you. We are videotaping the session, so please wait for the microphone to be brought over to you so that everyone in the room can hear you, hear your questions, and be mindful of the camera as you move around the room. So I have the pleasure of introducing Angelo Mendola. This is negotiations, win-win, and I guess I could say it was a pleasure, but I was one of the people who negotiated an agreement with Priority Payment Local to become one of NJBIA's affinity partners. And I had and I will say, pleasure of dealing with Angelo, because we really did. It really was, and he led it and led the negotiations, but it was a win-win for all of us, I feel. I know we're very happy with that. But Angelo is the president and COO of Priority Payments Local. It's out of Red Bank, New Jersey. It's headquarters in Red Bank, and it's a financial transactions and payment processing company. He founded Priority in 2013 with a longtime friend and his new business partner, Sal DiDonato, after spending years in banking, marketing, and infrastructure management. Priority Payment is one of our valued and premier partnerships that we have, one of our affinity partners. And I'm glad to not only call Angelo my colleague, but I'm also even more glad to call him my friend. So I'd like to introduce Angelo Mendola, President and CEO of Priority Payment. Thank you, Wayne.
Well, thank you, Wayne. And it is a pleasure to be here as well, and it was a pleasure negotiating, and it definitely was a win-win, I can tell you that. So as Wayne had mentioned, I'm the President and COO of Priority Payments, and I'm tasked with the illustrious duties of vendor relations and strategic partnerships and overseeing the entire office infrastructure. And I can tell you, it's very tasking. It's something that requires daily negotiation, whether it's with from the first 5 minutes of me waking up and negotiating with my 4-year-old to getting to the office and negotiating with traffic, trying to figure out the best way to get to work, and then getting on the phone and meeting with vendors and some of our new partners, our banking partners, some of our investors, and really taking the opportunity to teach our sales team and our operations team the best way to get through the day. And it feels like almost every step of the way is some type of negotiation. It's not as simple as a contract or a specific sale or an acquisition. It's really more of our everyday life. And today with the wonderful panel that we have, I'd like to introduce them, but after speaking to these wonderful women today, understanding that in every walk of life, every position that we hold, there's a high level of negotiation. And like I said, it's not as specific to a contract or a sale, but it can be just an everyday, walking through life. So today our panelists are Nancy Glick, Chief Operating Officer and Broker to Newmark Associates, Angela Harrington, Vice President, Communications and External Relations at Berkeley College, Christine Stearns, Director, Government Affairs at Gibbons, PC, and Deirdre Wheatley-Liss from Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman, PC. And today we're going to talk about the negotiation tactics that we want to hear about, how to get to that win-win scenario. So I'm going to start by asking Nancy and Angela a very important question, and we're going to go right into closing the deal, but then we're going to get into more about the holistics of closing the deal. So Nancy and Angela, if you don't mind, and start with Nancy, What are your 5 top tips when trying to close the deal?
That's a great question, Angelo. Actually, I'm going to backtrack a little bit and say I know the topic of this breakout session is negotiating for the win-win, but one of the first things I would suggest is that oftentimes when you say you're going in for a negotiation, that sets up someone's going to win, someone might lose. And you might go into a negotiation more considering it a conversation. And I think if you go in that framework, the communication will be more effective between everybody. That's just my first thought. 5 steps to really getting to close the deal. 1, I think you really have to look at taking yourself out of the equation. And that sounds counterintuitive, but once that deal becomes about you, you're not present to what's going on in the room. And we all do that. I'm a broker, so obviously we're looking to make a commission. Once you're at the end of a transaction and you're getting ready to close the deal, your mind is right away going to that commission. It's natural, that's what happens. And once you see yourself doing that, you have to take a step back, because now you're not present to what you really need to be focusing on to close the deal. Number 2, I would say you want to make sure you get into the end of a transaction, maybe something you've been working on 6 months, 8 months, a year, and there can be a lot of emotions involved when you're getting to the closing table. That's something to be really present to. You want to take yourself out of reacting and coming from an emotional standpoint versus responding. Something you might look at when you're having a reaction, your hands might be sweaty, maybe you're talking too fast, maybe you're talking too much. So you want to do some training for yourself to be able to be present to those things and to be able to take a step back and respond versus react. When you respond to something, you create a space. There's a lot of power in taking a minute, taking a pause, and just thinking before you respond. And if you take that space, you'll have a much more intellectual communication, and you'll be back in the driver's seat. So that's something I would consider.
Thank you, it's great. So
things.
Reactive versus proactive on the negotiation table. Angela, would you like to help us out here with this question?
Sure. Getting to win-win is the process, and it requires doing your homework, getting to know the party that you're doing business with, understanding what their needs are, not only your needs, but understanding the needs of the other side of the deal, and also working together toward getting to the winning agreement. It's so important to work together, to build that rapport, and to really have a give and take relationship throughout the process, taking small wins as much as the big win, because every small win is a step toward progress and toward moving your agenda forward. So it's really important to establish a relationship at the get-go and to really help build an environment of trust. And to me, that's the most important tip, regardless of how many steps there are along the way. It's really trying to build a safe environment of trust where you're working together to achieve something for both sides that benefits both sides.
I think that was great. So preparation, finding needs, small wins along the way to get to the big win. Incredible. Christina, Deirdre, would you like to add anything to some tips on closing the deal?
Well, I think my perspective on it is a little bit different. So my role as, for a long time I was with the Business and Industry Association, which was a great pleasure. And now with the law firm, I am less experienced in sort of sitting down to negotiate a big deal, though occasionally we would do that on big pieces of legislation. But I look at negotiating as something that happens sort of throughout the course of my day. Whether it is even just trying to establish when you're going to get a group of people to meet at the same time, or sort of when you're going to get input from the entire team to make a decision about a project that you're working on. We all do that throughout the course of the day, whether it is like Angelo, where he starts his day negotiating with his son, as well as sort of, and so that I think that's really important to think about negotiating in that way and how you can be successful knowing your audience is very important, being strategic, being prepared, all of those things. But the practice that you get all day long of trying to find successful negotiations. And then for some of us, it also is something that we do for ourselves, whether it is sort of annually or more frequently, where you're sort of trying to, folks are always concerned about negotiating, whether it is for a promotion, for an increase, for a bonus, for things that we're looking for.
So I have sort of a suggestion and a tip. The first is, if you have not read it already, or what I did is I downloaded it on Audible, the book Getting to Yes. It's all about looking at how it is that you can enter into negotiations, whether they're formal, like what I do as an attorney, or whether they're informal, trying to get somebody that you work with to actually get something done. And then the other thing is, I think that it's very important when negotiating to frame the conversation. So if you're going into a mediation as an attorney, you have to send a mediation statement and says, here are the facts that we agree on, here's what our position is on these things, and here are the open issues to be discussed. I don't see any reason why you can't do that in an email if you're entering into a negotiation with a vendor or with a client, or even somebody in your own organization. I think by framing what the discussion is, it gives you the power to then drive towards the resolution that you're working for.
Incredible. So there's a common theme here too. We're seeing a lot of talk about preparation, and framing is actually a new one. We like to call that a test shot, when we negotiate where we are. So we send out one of those missiles out first to see what kind of reaction we get. So when we get to the table, everyone's kind of on the same page. The expectations are right. Managing expectations is very important as well. And I think we're kind of all coming into one little hub here. Leads me on to my next question. So when preparing for one of these interviews or sales meetings or what have you, what are some of the things that you actually prepare, physically, mentally? Tell me more about that. And I'd like to start with Christine, if you don't mind.
I will say that I do spend a lot of time when I know that there's sort of a more formal meeting, thinking through, ensuring that I know exactly what I'm looking to get out of it, because that's really important. Now, that's not the only thing, and you need to be creative about how you get there, but you need to know what it is that your goal is. Then trying to think through how the sort of other party is going to be likely to react to that. Do we have similar interests? How can we find shared goals? Or what are they not going to like? How can you sort of balance that? Giving all of that some thought. Some people, it's going to be writing it out. Some people, you may actually want to sort of verbally practice, what it is that you're going to be saying in the meeting so you're more comfortable with it. Listening is really important. So when you make a proposal, you need to stop and give people a chance to react and really hear what it is that they're saying. And sometimes even when you're making an ask, stop. Make your ask. I will say that, and I don't know if it's women more frequently than men, but some people then kind of, then keep talking and don't let people have a chance to react. If you know what you're looking for, be strong, be thoughtful and pleasant, but be clear.
Have you ever sat in the car in the rearview mirror and kind of practiced that, or like in the mirror at home? Because you said practice it, right? So kind of know what you're going to say.
I do
tactics
practice.
Like that.
I believe NJM is in the room, so no, I'm not looking in the rearview mirror. I'm definitely have my eyes on the road.
I mean, when you're parked.
Just to be clear. But actually, I used to testify a lot in front of the legislature. When I have to do that, I have now a long commute. I actually found that to be a great time to practice my testimony, because you don't want to be reading it. I mean, we all know that some of this is the basics of public speaking, but it sort of plays into your negotiation skills. But you practice it, you find the right word, so that when you are in that setting, you're a bit more comfortable, the words come more easily to you. So I do think that kind of practice is really important.
Important. And now with technology, with your phone, that you could kind of turn the camera around, you could actually see yourself talking.
Okay, that sounds good. Yes, you're right.
I'm guilty of that, I got to tell you. So following on with that question, Nancy, what is some preparation that you do prior to a negotiation or sale meeting?
Well, certainly, Sally touched on this a little bit about hard skills and soft skills. So certainly if you're going into any meeting, you better be prepared with your hard skills, right? The information, the facts, the figures, the data, that's number one. But number two, in being in any type of sales position, we should all be always working on our soft skills. So what are your soft skills? Relationships, communication, and there's a lot of ways to do that. So lately we hear a lot about mindfulness, meditation, empowerment, taking self-awareness courses. So really, you want to continue to do that for yourself, because that's really how you're going to be the most effective in a meeting. We do a lot of empowerment training in our office, and we participate in courses through Landmark Worldwide. And really what they are courses for high performance through self-awareness. And I would recommend that to anybody, because the more you do in that respect, the stronger you will feel when you're in any meeting. But of course, first you have to know your stuff. So
That's right. So we talk a lot about soft skills, and maybe not everyone is familiar with what they are, but you just mentioned a few of them. Angela, can you take us back to the basics? What are some suggestions that you may have for ways to improve those soft skills that Nancy just talked about?
Well, practice.
Okay.
Practice makes perfect, and practice those skills in your communications with your clients, with your prospective clients, and that requires being strategic, the critical thinking skills, and that's part of being strategic. Communicating in various forums, whether it's through social media, interpersonal communications, and relationship building skills. One thing I want to say, which was something important that Deirdre mentioned in terms of how you frame your negotiations, it's important to have different scenarios when you walk into the room, and to be prepared to take 3 tracks, for instance, to get to where you want to be, and to not be greedy, to take what you can get. How many people here have watched Shark Tank? Over 50% of the contestants who don't make the deal, that happens because they didn't take the deal, the first offer that was made to them. Mark Cuban is a good example of a negotiator who puts it on the table. If you don't take his offer, it's off the table, period. So don't be greedy. And for those of you who have businesses you're looking to get clients, whether they're Fortune 500 clients or small business startups or mid-sized businesses, you really have to walk into the room wanting the deal so badly, and so that you're prepared to take what you can get, or to make an offer that's not on the table, to understand the offer. So for instance, you would like a 1-year contract. You have a communications firm that would like to have a 1-year contract with a pharmaceutical company, but the pharmaceutical company is doing business with the top agency in New York City, and you're not a top agency. But guess what? That agency doesn't want the business that you're going for, because they want the multi-million-dollar contract. You as a vendor have an opportunity here to find out what is the pain spot that big agency isn't handling, that you are equipped to handle, and put an offer on the table for a project so that you can score that deal. Once that project is successful, mark my words, you get that 1-year contract. So negotiation requires you to think outside of the box, to set up a scenario that's going to work for you and your business. Don't drive the dialogue. Don't be afraid to drive the dialogue and put that scenario. And it's all how you frame the proposal, and also understanding the value that you bring to the table and how you can deliver for that client.
Well said. Well said. So while we're framing correctly, and we've prepared, and we've gotten to the table, now there's a face-to-face meeting happening now. Deirdre, would you mind helping us understand how important is body language, or some of those cues that you take during a face-to-face meeting that you can help us understand?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that you need to think about. One thing, and just to speak from what Angelo was saying, is about the pain point. Whether it's a customer relationship and there's pain, or if it's an adversary relationship, you need to, I think the important thing, and this gets into, how do you start the discussion, is listening to what the other position is. There are times that people want to be heard about what it is that they're saying. And I don't mean hearing what they're saying, I mean actually listening to what they're saying. No one is always 100% right, and the other side is 100% wrong. The idea of a negotiation is you need to meet somewhere in the middle, and by doing that and seeing what they're passionate about, what's important to them, either eyes light up about a certain thing, or they talk faster about a certain element of the deal, that's what's important to them, and coming to an agreement on those pieces, the other pieces are going to then fall into place behind it, and those may be the pieces that you're more concerned about. And then as Christine said, I think it's very important too, when we're having these discussions from a body language perspective, take a deep breath. Okay, we work in the New York City metro area. Y'all might have noticed we speak a little fast to the rest of the country, right? So, think about what it is that you're saying. Give other people an opportunity to react. Just because people speak slowly, it doesn't mean that they aren't processing things. So those are two things that I think from a body language perspective is important. And give yourself an opportunity to absorb and, not squiggle your nose or whatever the case may be, so that people see, that something's distasteful about what it is that you've said. So, and that might be looking in the mirror and practicing your poker face, so.
That's right, that's right.
I wanted to add something to that, because you just reminded me of a story from when I was considerably younger. We have an expression in our office: if your customer's doing the waltz, you better not come in doing the cha-cha. And I just have this memory that popped up. I was 25 years old, and at the time I was traveling across the country to the Midwest and meeting with bankers to buy mortgages. I worked for Freddie Mac at the time, back when that wasn't a dirty word. And I had had a series of appointments with different bankers throughout the day. All of the bankers were older gentlemen. I was this young girl from New York, and I had a plane, maybe a 6 o'clock flight, and this was my last meeting of the day. And I remember I walked into his office. He was I could picture him so clearly, a little pudgy guy, bald with a mustache, sitting behind this big, huge desk. And I walked in, and I was, ready to give my presentation, buy his mortgages, leave. And I started talking, and he stood up and he said, "Honey, you gotta slow down." And it just was such an awareness for me that I was not at all on the same page as him. And after that, I toned down my speaking, my New Yorkese, all of that, so that I could be more in tune with the customers that I was trying to reach. But it was a good lesson.
Great story, great story. Yeah, so coming in at 100 miles per hour from New York City to Utah probably doesn't make the most,
Exactly.
most sense.
It was Ohio.
Ohio, close enough.
Ohio.
A lot of it's like the basic stuff that I think a lot of folks in different walks of life, when it comes to whatever you're negotiating, is what's like the first thing that you do? How do you break the ice? A lot of people like to go right into business, and I think sometimes that's the wrong approach, or sometimes it could be the right approach depending on how you framed it, right? But what are some suggestions that you may have as a break the ice scenario? Is it small talk? Is it get right to business? What do you think is the best way to do that? And I'll start that with Deirdre again.
So again, I'm a big believer in the framework. Whether it's a 2-page email, it's the things that are on the first page of what it is that you're talking about. I did grow up down south, believe it or not, so I do believe in small talk. If somebody's not interested in it, they'll let you know. But I think that you need to get to the point of a conversation where the people that are having the conversation are separate from the thing that you're conversing about. That gets to the point of taking your ego out of it. Because it's not about you, it's about a deal at the end of the day for what it is that you're doing, and finding out that we can respect each other and have a conversation if you can. There are some people, and this is in that Getting to Yes book, that are win-lose people. If you listened to Sally earlier, you might suggest that some of our male colleagues might be more in the win-lose than in the win-win category. For those people, they need to create a win to have a satisfactory experience. So you may, from some of the small talk and ice break, have to change what your tactic's going to be, because unless you present them with something where they can walk away with a win, you're not going to walk away with a deal. And I do think it's important to spend 5 minutes doing that and to see whether or not this can be a collegiate conversation or if it's going to be purely confrontational. And if it is, where you walk in with your 3 strategies, one of them in my mind always is not plan B, but alternate plan A. If this isn't going to work, ever, right? You've got a client, they want you to do something where you're going to lose money on the deal. What's plan A alternate? What are you going to be doing? And if that's the case, don't spend your time, walk away from it as soon as possible. It's okay to say this isn't working, say no, we're done.
Well said. Christine, can you help us out with some break the ice scenarios?
Well, I first want to comment, because I think you brought up something that's really important to remember, that sometimes you need to know when you should just walk away. And that is really important and part of your preparation of knowing what you're looking for, and that's okay, that's not losing. It is, because spending a lot of time on something that's either not going to lead to a productive result or something that isn't beneficial isn't a good use of your time. So I think that was a really good point that you brought up. I think that, just remembering, I should say basic communication skills, but a lot of people that still, you know, that stuff is difficult. You know, open-ended questions, spend a little time getting to know folks. Most of the kinds of negotiations I have are sort of less formal, and so it is helpful to get to know your audience. And so, you know, when you're bringing folks in to talk to legislators, to let people have sort of a minute to get to know each other, and even inquire if we're in to pitch their support for something or their opposition for something, to kind of get a sense of where they're coming from and what their knowledge base may be. So a couple good open-ended questions, and where you're sort of mindful of the response you're getting, can be really important and to help with a better outcome.
Yeah, and those were some of the things we were talking about earlier when we met inside, and I think it was pretty powerful to understand that, you know, small talk is important. Getting to know who you're dealing with is super important, and each of you have touched on preparation. And, you know, with the amount of technology that we have today and the amount of information that we put out there about ourselves, I mean, simply put, I mean, someone can walk away here today and know a lot about what the panelists do, you know, a lot about what I do, simply from a bio in a pamphlet. But doing some research before, I mean, we all try to get our name out there for whatever reason it is, because we're in some type of sales capacity, no matter what you do. I mean, if you're an attorney or you run the local grocery store, you're in sales. I mean, that's just the bottom line of it. But doing some research before, like looking at, you know, simple social media sites like LinkedIn, will tell you a little bit about that person's past, what college they went to, what are some of the roles that they had in their past career, and that may relate to something that you do, and that small talk becomes very easy. I mean, it's as simple as being noticing something in someone's office or a conference room that you're in that may be a signed baseball or a picture of something that may kind of spark a conversation, or an item of clothes, a pin on the lapel, something may spark a conversation, and it kind of takes down some barriers. I mean, what we're trying to do when you go through some type of sales negotiation, contract negotiation, are remove obstacles and remove barriers. And those barriers are usually because you don't know each other. You know, you have to remember at the end, as Deirdre said, the ultimate goal is to get the deal done. But you're also dealing with people. People tend to do business with people they like. I mean, that's just the bottom line. But sometimes the deal just has to get done whether you like the person or not. But you have to have some type of common ground. And I learn that every day. I mean, I don't consider myself an expert in anything, because school is always open. I'm learning a lot today. And, you know, I was chosen as the moderator for the win-win. But I'm learning something in every response that I get. And I'm writing them down too, because that's important. Learning during a negotiation helps you with the next negotiation, right? So that leads me to the next question. In your own experiences, personal or professional, can you share some common past mistakes, or, you know, we like to call them explosions, you know, during a call or a conference or a face-to-face meeting? What are some common mistakes that you have made, and how are you able to learn from those and then overcome them in the future? Nancy, if you don't mind, would you like to start for us?
Yeah, let me think about that a second. But one thing I just wanted to add to what we were talking about before, an expression that's easy to remember: be interested, not interesting. So if you're interested in what that other person is saying and not worried about, you know, because often we're having a conversation and you've already gone 3 steps ahead in your head, and you're looking at what you're going to respond to the next question. But if you're truly interested in what that person is saying, so be interested, not interesting. I always kind of keep that and work with that. An experience, yeah, you know, actually I had one recently. I was working on a transaction with a customer I had done a number of deals with previously, and we had done several more complex transactions, bigger properties, whatever. And he came to me and he asked me, he wanted to buy an office condo for his personal use. I was great. I started showing him investment properties, properties similar to what we had worked on previously, and nothing was right. Everything was like, nah. And after a good 3 months of going back and forth, I had another conversation with him, and I was like, exactly what are you looking for? And he said, I just want to buy a little office condo for myself. And I realized that I had totally, you know, put all of my previous thoughts about him into that conversation, and I hadn't listened at all to what he really wanted. The next thing I showed him, he bought, because it was a small office condo for $250,000. He's still there to this day. He's a great customer of mine. But it was an awareness for me that you really have to take your previous judgments and opinions and everything out of listening and make sure that you're listening really to what your customer is asking for.
Great. Angela, can you help us out with some mistakes that you've made and learned from?
I guess it's more about lessons learned. Sometimes you get so focused on the project you're excited about that you forget to look at the organization that you could potentially be doing business with and whether or not their values are aligned with yours. And so that's, I guess, the lesson that I learned, where you see the project, you really want it so badly, and then you come to realize that, you know, I like the project, but the organization isn't the right fit for me. So it's really understanding how to avoid a potential problem once you really get into it and understand you're able to pull out of it. So that's one lesson. And another thing I want to share is the importance of reputation and the importance of building your reputation and making sure that you align yourself with people who support you, support your business, who are like-minded, and also people you can learn from in business who will help mentor you through deals. And it doesn't have to be somebody in your organization or even an outside organization you're working with possibly, but a true mentor. Align yourself with top executives and people who've been down this road, who you can bounce ideas off of and who could help you get to where you need to be. And I think that's a really important lesson for me. You're not alone in anything that you do in business, to understand that regardless of the size of your business, you're never alone in any scenario, whether it's a negotiation or whether it's a vendor relationship or a supply chain or retail sales matter, whatever it is, you're never alone. And dialogue like this and organizations like NJBIA, that's what NJBIA is here for, to support businesses and to get us to where we need to be.
Fantastic. Thank you. What other kind of mistakes have we learned from? Christine, would you like to share? I think this is an important question because everyone wants to hear, you know, not everyone's been 100% successful in their life. They made some mistakes, they learned from it, and others, it would help them to learn from them as well.
Yeah, so I had to put a project together where and I'd spent a lot of time thinking through how we were going to accomplish the project. Sort of spent some time trying to get people in the same room, couldn't really finally get everybody in the same room. But I realized that there was one key person who, because he was so busy, I had not really connected with, and who really didn't come to the meeting understanding what we were trying to accomplish. And in the end, the meeting wasn't at all productive because he was sort of in a completely different place. And it reminded me that sometimes it is also thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to get it done, but also sort of being sure that you have buy-in of all those participants, because then it was a lot more work to sort of go back, talk it through, get him to a place where we could get the project done, and it really sort of set us back on something that we were trying to get accomplished. So I do think that thinking through, and this is when we all serve on boards or report to boards and committees, that making sure that folks aren't caught off guard and have an understanding of what you're looking to accomplish and getting that buy-in is often really important to getting to your results.
So managing expectations and setting expectations are very important. It goes back to that original theme, preparation and framing, right?
And sharing input or information and getting people's input and taking it into account so they have some buy-in.
Right, and listening is very important, right, when it comes to that. 2 ears, 1 mouth. So that whole scenario takes us into a world where, when you're sitting in front of someone, everyone wants to talk, right? Everyone loves to talk. I don't care where you are. You love to talk. You want to try to get your point across, and thinking the faster you say it, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. But as humans, and we're all busy, right? It's a busy world today. We lose interest very fast. So during some type of meeting, if one person goes way too long, they've lost 80% of their audience halfway through. So it's very important to know what your points are going to be, and that goes back to setting your goals and make sure you make those points. Then you can go in between those points and kind of talk through them, but make sure you get the points across. And that was my point, so I went right to the point. So in the theme of today's summit, a lot of the questions that we received through email, we polled a lot of the members, and so did the BIA for some of these questions, and I think these are important ones. I'd like to hear the answers to this because I have a lot of women in my workplace that report up to me, and This is a question that I ask myself all the time. You know, research shows that women are more reluctant than men to negotiate their salary offers or raises. Why do you think that is? Deirdre, would you like to start?
Sure. So we heard the statistics from Sally earlier. As an attorney, apparently I started off at a disadvantage to begin with, which I was totally unaware of at the time. I think that there's a couple of things, and I polled the table that I sat at when we were doing our speed networking about what some of the other women were concerned about when it came to salary negotiations. And here are a couple of points they came up with. The confidence to ask for a number, okay? You know, easy one for that, to your point. Look in the mirror, just keep asking for it over and over again. Whatever number that you're starting off with, I'm telling you right now, it's too low. Start with a higher number. What is the worst thing that happens, right? So, you know, go in, I need a 50% increase. And here's why I need a 50% increase, and here's how it's gonna add to your bottom line, right? You laugh, I've seen it done before, right? So here's what it is that I need to have. Maybe you're gonna ask for a 5% increase. Well, why not start with 10? You may end up with 5. You may or may not get your top point as to what it is that you're going to. Saying no to something else that comes back, right? Well, we have a rule here that nobody can get promoted within 3 years. Okay, well, that's not acceptable to me. Right? This is what it is that I do. I've been able to do this for the ROI. If you're saying I can't get promoted within 3 years, what else can we do so that I can get to the place where I want to be within the next 3 months? Come up with a plan. Hold the person accountable to the plan. Singing your awards to the person who's actually taking credit for what it is that you do. Okay? So many times you report up to somebody, and this person reports to somebody else, and they're reporting to somebody else about all this wonderful stuff that's going on, but they're not saying that Christine's doing all the wonderful stuff. It's that their team and their management is so awesome. Okay? Maybe you need to skip over, not obnoxiously, but make sure that other people know what it is that you do. Sally talked about this. No one else is going to sing your praises. Throw out on LinkedIn, I just closed this huge deal, whatever the case may be. Have conversations with other people so that they know that you're the one who's contributing. You're not just the doer, but the person who's actually putting it together. You're not comfortable having the conversation, tough. There's lots of things that we do in life where you're not comfortable. My favorite sayings is fake it until you make it, okay? Just do it. No one knows that you're faking it. It's only you. So just do that. You don't like the answer that you're getting, or you think you're gonna get no for an answer. One of my other favorite sayings is ask for forgiveness and not permission. Just go ahead and accomplish it, and there it is, and now what it is that we're gonna do with. And then the last one I think really hurts women when it comes to salary negotiations is that we try to perfect what it is that we're doing. Well, I can't ask now because this quarter hasn't closed, this deal hasn't closed, I can't add this to my resume. And we allow perfection to get in the way of success, all right? It is what it is right now. Look at it, make it the best that it can be, because if you don't start the conversation now, it's not going to be there. And then the last thing is don't take the, hey, we'll talk about it again in 6 months. No, we're going to talk about it in 3 months and make sure that you have the meeting. And if not, that goes back to what I said about plan A alternate. You're valuable so many other places than your organization or whatever it is that you're doing right now. Be open to that. Yes, change is difficult, change is hard, but it also gives you great new opportunities where people are going to value you the way you are today.
Great. I love the don't ask for forgiveness, ask for permission. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, because it makes sense if you are going to ask for something, you ask for, or you kind of prerequisite it. It's like, oh, kind of put your guard up a little bit, and you're right about that. Make the wrong question or wrong request, and then just say, I'm sorry, and I tried, you know, and no one's ever going to get mad at you for trying. I have some really great people that work for me, and I tend to be proactive because I don't like these kind of negotiations with employees, because I like to reward them as much as we can when we can. And I think it's pretty obvious that no one's ever, on my team, right, Marissa, no one's had to ask me for a raise because I've offered it. You know, when it's time, it's important, but not every employer is like that. You know, it's all about how do we pay people the least to do the most sometimes, in a lot of companies, but not all companies are like that. But in those ones that are, and as you just mentioned, singing your own praises actually works. You know, not everybody notices every little thing that you do. So it's good to keep a little bit of a journal or your own internal resume. Say, hey, here's what I accomplished. You may not know this, but here's what I did. That's important. As an employer or a hiring manager or a leveled up manager, they may not know everything that you're doing. So asking for that raise, say, hey, this is what I do now. I could do this a lot better as well. give me more responsibility, and I like more money to do that. So it's like a give and take kind of scenario. Angela, would you help us with that question as well, negotiating salary offers?
Sure. Compensation is utmost. You want to communicate the value that you've brought to the organization, the pay equity across the board. If your position is equitable, the compensation with others throughout the organization, especially the male-female compensation ratio. But most importantly, it's to show how you deliver for the organization, how you go above and beyond speaking with facts, also negotiating steps toward getting to that salary and possibly building in a bonus. For instance, if they can't meet you where you want to be, take something that you can get and then build in a bonus or a review period. Also, it's not all about compensation, it's also about benefits. So if you can negotiate, say, a work from home package or some other benefit that is amenable to you and attractive to you, that's important. And also, it's a good opportunity for the organization to look at itself in terms of compensation. When a really great employee is coming to the table with a request to be paid the way that they feel that he or she should be paid, it's a great opportunity for the organization to look at itself and even conduct a study of some sort to help impact some change. That's a very altruistic way of looking at it, but you need to have those conversations in the workplace, especially with your superiors, because we care about our associates and we want you to succeed at our organization at Berkeley College. And that's one thing I love about our employer, is that the door is always open for that dialogue, and we're constantly looking at ways that we can make the workplace better for our associates, and also, of course, our campus environment for our students. So I would say, look at the whole picture of your employment. Is your pay equitable? How do you want to increase it? And what are some of the other benefits you're looking for to help make your situation better? But also, when your situation improves, the situation of others around you will also improve.
That's great. You kind of set the stage for that. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things. Listening to these suggestions, I think some of them are really great. But one, a little bit of pre-work. So, when you step into that conversation, we like to say you have to get in that other person's world. So you could have the best laundry list of everything you've done, and if you haven't created a listening from that person on the other side of the table, none of it's going to matter. If you're going in to ask for a raise and this individual just found out that the company lost their biggest customer, it doesn't jive. So you have to make sure that you're in their world and you know what's going on. The other thing I would suggest is, before you go into any meeting, be really clear with yourself, what is the result you're looking to achieve? So a lot of times it's easy to say, okay, I want to make more money. But do a little work for yourself and say, what's behind that want? Usually there's a commitment behind that. So it's not just that you want to make more money. Maybe you want financial security for yourself and your family. So when you're standing in that place of what you're committed to, you're going to have a different conversation than just, I want to earn more money. So I would say do a little work for yourself before you even, get into the conversation.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that? No. Also.
Just one other thing is, just when you talked about compensation, what is it, and to your point also, Nancy, what can you do to create a win-win? Okay, so your organization, they don't normally offer bonuses. Okay, fine. Is there something you can do that's then targeted and say, okay, well, if I work X number of more hours, or if I cover these Saturday shifts, or if I bring in new business, something that's objective that can then be tied to compensation, can make it easier for somebody to say yes, because what you've done is you've now differentiated yourself from the person who has the same title and position of you, but hasn't done the same thing that you have done. I think that that's another way of being able to look at it, because organizations want to retain talent. It is incredibly expensive to replace people when they leave. You want them to be able to be happy. Maybe you need to help somebody think of a creative way to compensate you more appropriately. Agenda that and bring it into the meeting and give them an opportunity to say yes to your brilliant idea.
Right, creating that
Great
win-win is
suggestion.
super important. So that full disclosure type of thing is in your head and in yourself, in your own preparation, is what happens if I don't do this? And what happens if I do it? What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? And kind of trying to find that middle ground, or maybe you get what you want. but it'll never happen if you don't ask. And you know, a lot of common themes here through the panel. I want to thank all 4 of you for an amazing panel. I learned a lot. I hope you all did as well. And at this time, I'd like to offer some questions to the panelists or myself. Yes, I think we have a microphone that's going to go around. We have a question here.
Sure. Thanks so much. This has been great. But I do have a question, because a lot of the themes that we've been hearing are, to try to go into a place where, they value talent and they want to, really keep their employees of value and to really work through it. But I'm just curious about your suggestions when, you feel that you're in the right place at the right time, you feel that you've done above and beyond, you have differentiated yourself, and you go in and the answer is just no. And it's not you might be a newer employee, or you might just not feel confident enough to go back. Because I think sometimes and so often when we hear that flat no, we often feel that the door is shut. And it's not necessarily shut, but that's what we're hearing. And we go back to our offices and say, well, I asked. The answer was no. So I'm just curious about how you would approach that when you do get a no, and it seems like you might be hearing the door shut. Is there some tactics, some situations, not even just with salary increases, but just in general negotiations, that you would say, this is some opportunities to go back and really keep knocking, that would be appropriate?
I'll answer that. I don't think there's a such thing as a no, because when you approach someone with some type of expectation, or you want a promotion or a salary increase, and at this time they say no, then it's your responsibility to go back to that person during that conversation and say, I'm really excited and committed to the organization. This is how I could see that I could further the organization. Can we pick up this conversation 3 months from now or whatever? Is there a way that you see me moving in the organization? Where do you think that my skills would align for growth in the organization? Have a conversation with that person, and always be confident in yourself. It's not easy when you hear that word no, but at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself and to your growth and your expectations for your own future. So my philosophy is there's no such thing as no. Even when you're hearing those words, there's always a way to get to where you want to be. The important thing is to continue that dialogue with that manager, but also to find other leaders in the organization who you can confide in. I would identify mentors, whether you have a formal mentorship program or not. Find someone in the organization you can trust to have that rapport. I have many people in my own life, in my current position, but also in my personal life, who I can speak to when maybe expectations aren't where they need to be, or I'm not getting somewhere at a certain time. But I understand that it's a journey, and your career is a journey and a constant negotiation. So it's just a matter of finding that alternative and that way to get there. It's just a moment in time. It doesn't define your future.
And then we had a question back here after.
So I have 2 questions. The first is, at the beginning of the panel, someone said, don't be greedy. And then later on, someone else says, if you want 50%, ask for 50%. How do you balance that little space between appearing to be greedy and going for what you feel you are worth at an organization? And then the second question is, how do you correct the wrong? You get in and you have a number in your head, and they offer you a number, and it's more than what you had in your head, and then you find out you're still 25% less than the men in the organization. How do you go back and try to correct that? Or is it just what you're stuck with because you accepted it and there's no way to correct it?
Because I was the one who said ask for
I have it written
50%.
down, too.
Okay.
50% I wrote down.
I think the don't be greedy is, and this goes back to what Christine said before. You need to know what is your internal framework, right? What is your ask, and what is your this would be awesome, and what is your bottom line, okay? And in order to get here, if you assume that we're going to negotiate, you got to start up high to get to where this is right now, okay? So I don't think that those things are inconsistent with each other, but it comes down to preparation. If you find that you're not getting paid properly at any point in time, if any of you do, I don't think the door's closed. I mean, you have to go in, though, not to say I'm not getting paid properly because I'm a woman, or I'm not getting paid because Frank makes this amount of money. You need to go in and say, I generated sales revenue of, $3.5 million for this organization this year. It's increased 25% year over year, and I'm not getting compensated properly for what it is that I do. So I just, but again, if you don't ask, you're never going to get. And the worst thing that happens if you ask for something is that somebody says no. No one's going to throw tomatoes at you. I mean, just no. Okay, fine. But you asked.
And can I just add to that? When you ask, don't apologize.
Yeah.
Why do women apologize when they're asking for something that's fair? So I do think that it is really important to do that. Go in, ask, be clear, build your case. Don't apologize. And also know when it is that you're in a place that if they're going to say no, that you go someplace else, because you may then end up in a different organization where folks will say yes and will sort of treat you better, and that is important. But it is important for folks to understand the full balance of what is important to them about their work, but certainly being fairly compensated is part of that.
You want to jump in?
Since I'm the one who said don't be greedy.
I'm greedy.
They all took it.
But don't be taken advantage by greedy people either. That's the point, really. And my point was, it's a step-by-step process when you're negotiating, whether it's for a salary or a deal in business. If you can't get 50% or 25% and you can get 10%, take that now, figure out the future of the, if this is the right fit for you, this organization. But at the same time, maybe as you're moving forward in the organization, there's an opportunity there, and there should be an opportunity where you can open a dialogue among the executives there to address this issue, if that issue is really prevalent in the organization.
I'd like to actually add to your question as well. I think because they are powerful questions, and a lot of the things that there's a lot of misconception about certain things. So as a hiring manager, I can tell you, it's actually impressive sometimes to hear the requests from people, but they have to be realistic. You can't say, what, I make $50,000 a year now, I think I deserve $1 million a year. It's probably not going to happen. I mean, what Deirdre said before about 50%, that's kind of, I haven't seen a 50% raise in a long time, but that's probably a little bit higher too. But if it's realistic, why not ask for it? If it has to make sense. So going in prepared, as Christine, she took out her piece of paper and she went like this, right? Little body language. You're going in there with a why. Why do I deserve this? If you're just going to say, I need it because I like to have a nicer car, that's different. But if it's because I do the same as so-and-so or more than so-and-so and I like to be compensated properly, absolutely go in and ask for that. The second question that you had was, what if you kind of made that mistake initially? In the real world, right, as we all live in, typically your employment package is some type of an agreement. So making sure that when you sign on to a position or to a company, you understand the expectations. Can I even ask for a raise within 6? Am I on probation for something? There's always these kind of things set in stone that are kind of flexible though sometimes. You know what, I was hired for this role, but now you have me doing this. Or I've actually exceeded our agreement or my contract, right? Sometimes we're on contract. And now you have the opportunity to ask for a realistic scenario. And I could sense it in the room that a lot of the questions and thoughts are surrounding pay, right? We live in a world where we're not really sure if we're compensated, right? We see a lot of things going on outside of our world on TV and social media, and we see the lavish life of certain individuals, but remember, they're a very small percentage of what the real world really is. And a lot of us have to go to work every day and figure out how can we impact the company we work for or the company that we own, right? And then how do we make more money doing that? Because we do want those nicer things, and there's nothing wrong with that. We want to better our lives, that's why we're here. But it has to be realistic. So the $1 million request, if you make $900,000, maybe it's a sensible request, but you have to make it make sense and come prepared, right? You're welcome.
We have a question.
Yeah, we have a question here. She was the, yeah.
Hi, good morning. So one of the tools that I think is helpful in general to being prepared is, the performance evaluation, but a self-performance evaluation. So we've instituted at my organization the self-evaluation performance form. So when I review my employees, they're all given that in advance. And then there is a question on it as well as to how can you work better with your, I don't know what's called, whatever I am, right? Your boss. So my employees also have an opportunity to give feedback that reflects on me as a leader in the organization. And that's invaluable to me because you don't always see the forest for the trees because you're running and organizing and hiring and you're worrying about their compensation, et cetera. But I've also implemented that on me. So when I have my review with my board, I present to them. They've not asked it of me, but I've presented it to them. And I just simply talk to other women in a similar situation that run organizations similar to mine as to what do they do with their employees. And then I basically downloaded from the internet a self-performance evaluation form and tailored it professionally to what we do in my organization. So if you don't have that in place, get one in place. And it would show initiative on your own to your employer if you bought one yourself. And if you do have one at your company, I would look at it and review it and see where it can be improved or really take it to heart and use it as the tool to present your best self. Because I think you'll see when you do it, it is a reality check of where have I been, what were the goals I set for myself prior. I might not have met those now this past year. What do I need to do? So you can go confidently with the ask and back it up. And if you are told no, you may have in your own hand why you were told no. And then you can go back and kind of reflect on that. And it helps you measure how greedy or how you want to negotiate. But it is a tool, I think, that gives you, whether you practice talking in the mirror or you have your self-performance with you, you have a sense of your own goals and achievements, and it backs up the ask.
Very good.
So,
back to preparation, right? Very good. Can we take one more question?
One more?
One more question.
Okay. I know. Oh.
So I'm Barbara Kaufman at Newark Regional Business Partnership, and first comment I wanted to make is that nobody who asked a question said their name. And what I'd recommend is that when you stand up to ask a question, you identify who you are and what your organization is. And the second is just a reinforcing, first of all, you all did a fantastic job, thank you. But the importance of asking and making the point of what you've accomplished. The first time that I did that, I really thought it was obvious what I was doing. And when I went through the list of everything I was doing, my boss turned to me and said, "You do all that?" And the next day came to me and he gave me a raise. And I learned an important lesson there. So I think what you're saying that, we all think that it's, standing out and everybody should know, but they don't. So thank you.
Very good.
One more. How can we say no?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rose Santana. I'm actually from Berkeley College. But my question is, earlier someone mentioned that we should definitely take the small wins. And I hear a lot that women usually do take the small wins. When is it appropriate for women to take the big win just like the men do?
Always. The small wins lead to the big wins. They're not exclusive. A small win and a big win, they're not exclusive to each other. It's my point was it's a step-by-step process to get to the big win. But of course, you always want to go for the big win. That's keeping your eyes on the prize and focus. For instance, you're building a business or you're building a career. You want to be the president or an executive vice president. You have to take steps, every step in your career along the way to get to where you need to be. The point is, it doesn't happen overnight. So you really have to work. You have to envision, first of all, have a strategy, understand what your goals are, put a strategy together, look at others who are in the winning position, for instance, and what have they done to get to where they need to be? How have they defined themselves? What can you do to adapt similar techniques in your own career? That's really, so small win leads to big win.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank the NJBIA for having me, and it was truly my pleasure being the moderator for this panel. I think we're going to close it up. We're not taking any more questions. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelo. Not only were you a great moderator, but bringing in your perspective from your business was so valuable. What a fantastic panel we had, and you always know it's a great panel when we have to cut the questions off, and we had so many other people, and we apologize, but as we keep saying, and Michelle says, you got to keep the conversations going. So just because the formal question and answers have stopped, it doesn't mean that you can't still approach these lovely women and get some advice from them. So I'd really like to give a round of applause to our panelists, Nancy, Angela, Christine, and Deirdre. Fantastic.